Hey, Buru, hey, Boya, hey, Buche, everybody in Cyberland. Hey, it's your favorite babalao. At least I hope so. Omodu, Mondileke coming at you with another great video. And one that I think we should always talk about, and one that we should never ever forget, and we need to always stay conscious of, right? And that's going to be the concept of Eshu. Right? A lot of times we begin to understand that, Eshu is a very mysterious being. Eshu is more than just a divinity, but part of the life creation as a whole. And when I say life, I'm not just talking about Aye, I'm not talking about humans, I'm talking about the beginning of all things. Sometimes we mention the beginning of our story as the Big Bang. Sometimes we mention that Olodumare created the light from the void, and that's what created the Big Bang. A lot of times we always forget the void and we always focus on the light. And I think it's important for us to focus more on the void and how that void brings balance to our lives and what is this critical role that ASU plays for us. And I think for the most part, many people always want to kind of label issue one way, shape, or form because they think they understand them. I would tell you, even with my little time as a babalao, a couple of decades now, right? I would honestly tell you that, I learned something new about issue every time I read up on tratados, every time I go to a new ceremony, every time I mount a new issue, you learn something new and you learn the whys. So I'm hoping to kind of help share some of those whys, not necessarily going into secrets, not necessarily touching bases on things that have to do with the ceremonial aspects or things that have to do with babalaos or anything like that, but more to kind of deepen your understanding. And that's the goal. So with that said, like I always like to tell you, hey, it's your favorite babalao, at least I hope so. Give me the like, give me the share, give me the subscribe, and let's get after some of these deep details because they're important and they're value added nonetheless. So, as always, thank you for tuning in. Right? I already kind of gave you a layout. We're going to talk about issue, right? And we also know issue as Elegua. We know Eshu spelled ESU or ESHU, right? We know Elegua, right? In the Lukumí tradition, right? And I want to make sure that we're talking the same sheet of music, right? Because you notice I mentioned Eshu and then I mentioned Elegua. So we're gonna dig into that as well. But first things first, right? So I understand that within the Lukumi traditions, we understand that a lot of synchronization has made its way right into the Yoruba culture by way of the slave trade, right? And we noticed and we recognize this, right? This is not a mystery. But more importantly, we need to understand why it's important to always still remember the blood, the sweat, the tears, and the sacrifices done by those slaves that made it across that giant pond of water that we call the Atlantic Ocean, right? And made it to the New World, made it to the islands, made it to South America, you name it, and created a system, right? That is not only powerful, that is not only evolutionary, that is not only challenging to the world stage, and we can never forget that. And insulting that, I think, is very pivotal. So here's what I'm gonna say. Don't ever mix Yoruba faith with those of the Abrahamic faiths, because there's a term that I hear a lot about Eshu. That Eshu is the devil, right? And I hear a lot of people talk like that, and I say, where did you get this from, right? So Eshu is not the devil, right? Eshu is not chaos and incarnate, right? Um, he is a divine gatekeeper. He's the guardian of destiny and an essential messenger, nonetheless, between the earthly and the spiritual. He opens the roads to prosperity. And when he's dishonored, guess what he does? He closes them just as quick. because Eshu will always be that balance and that evolution that's always going to push us to be better going forward. Before anything reaches Orumila, Ochun, Yemaya, Obata, even Obatala, it doesn't matter. You name the divinity, it will pass by Eshu. So today, we're going to take that deeper step, right? Not only are we going to explore who he is, but we're also going to share some of the, most recognizable, some of the more powerful caminos or paths or avatars of Eshu. We're going to break down some of the concepts, right? And then we're going to kind of uncover the roles that they play in our lives. And I want you guys to, each and every one of you, to really take a moment and resonate with what I'm saying. All right. Now that I see I got a couple of people out here, Taishani Boroboya Buche Chemialo. All right, who else we got out here? All right, I think we're ready to hit the road because it's late for some of the people on the East Coast. I'm in Central Standard Time, so sorry, guys. But let's get after it. All right, so nonetheless, let's talk about Eshu and Elegua. I want to clear up some confusion there, okay, if possible. And first things first, the answer, right, before we move forward, right, addressing are Eshu and Elegua the same thing? Right? And that's a valid question. And a lot of times we find ourselves kind of asking ourselves, hey, what is the difference? Right? And whenever we kind of say, okay, who is Eshu and why is Elegua something that's consecrated through Ocha? Eshu is consecrated through Ifa. So we at least understand that much, right? So we should acknowledge that, right? In addition, right? We also need to kind of look at some of the other concepts that I think is important to understand, that these are sometimes interchangeable, right? But their meanings, their roles, they diverge and they contrast greatly. Right? So when we look at the origins and the consecrations and the functions, right, of these different traditions or these different concepts, right, of Eshu, Elegua, right? We got to start to kind of really dig that in a little bit. And I like to thank, the Ishe brothers because, they're the ones that practice, right? The concept of Eshu. That was a divine being with immense spiritual authority. And if you read the stories of Osomaru and a lot of the elder folks from Nigeria, when they started to kind of recapture the things from Eshu, we understand that he's also the enforcer, the divine law. And when that came over to the Afro-Cuban side of the house, right, we understood and we recognized this. And we began to ensure that we had infused Eshu into our everyday lives. Eshu is very much different from Isheshe and with Lukumí. Not in the essence of who is Eshu, but how do we utilize Eshu. In Isheshe, we understand that Eshu is not necessarily something that's mounted for the home, but something that's mounted for the village. Something that's mounted for the outside, not necessarily for the inside. And I'm not trying to speak for my Isheshe brothers, but I'm sure they will confirm a lot of this that I'm saying. And I think that's important to understand. So as we continue to kind of, look at, who is Eshu, right? We all agree that he is the custodian of Ache. We understand he's a messenger for Olodumare. We understand that Eshu governs the realm of cause and effect. And this is where people get confused with him being a trickster, right? And amusements, for amusement's sake, you know what I mean? He's more of a cosmic regulator, right? Of balance, of justice, of communication between Orun, right? Which is the land of the divinities or Olodumare, right? Maybe AKA heaven, if we want to use that word, and Aye, earth, right? So we got to kind of look at it from that sense. Now, in contrast, when we look at it from the lenses of Lukumí practice only, particularly as practice, as I came up in the lineage of Lukumí, Afro-Cuban, Criollo, right? Particularly as practiced in Cuba itself. Elegua emerged as a more approachable, right? Kind of an anthropomorphized figure that we recognize that comes from the energy of Eshu. And this is why people get this confused because Elegua has always existed. This is not an invention. Elegua has always been there. It's just that the secret of consecrating Elegua never really in practice in Nigeria. In Nigeria, those same slaves that came from that same land brought those secrets and saw the need for Elegua because we were no longer in a system where we were just crowning one person at a time, or I'm sorry, crowning one Orisha, and you were part of that tribe. And when you were done learning, they crown you again because that's the practice that they do in Isheshe. So for those of you who are Lukumí and you crown one time only, because you only got one crown, you only got one guardian Orisha, there is no more crowning the additional Ashe of any other Orisha. In Ocha, right, and within Lolokumi style, we crown one time and you receive the compliments of all the divinities, the basic divinities that are required in order to run everything that is needed in your life, right, according to certain doctrine. Now, with that said, the slaves recognized that Elegua played a massive role, bringing together all that power required us to now initiate or consecrate Elegua in the land of Ocha. So we understand that Elegua emerged, right? And he was portrayed, and he's still portrayed a lot of times as a young boy, a playful, more mischievous, right? Who protects homes, opens doors, brings opportunity. Elegua is the first Orisha received in Ocha and is usually placed behind the door, right? In order for him to guard its energy. So Elegua very much is still an owner of the crossroads, no different than Eshu. Still a gatekeeper of Ashe, no different than Eshu. But we needed to consecrate an Orisha type in order to ensure those things happen. So what happened? So through the process of synchronism, right, or synchronization, right, Eshu's archetype was kind of split when instead it should have been explained that Elegua was an essence and a power of Eshu, right? So Elegua became the household guardian, right? And Eshu remained a ceremonial force, especially in the hands of the babalaos. But because Ocha couldn't consecrate Eshu, they had to rely on Elegua. So we got to kind of begin to peel that back a little bit, right? So Eshu cannot be received without the initiation in Ifá, which is Eshu de Fundamento, right? Or Fundamento is the foundational Eshu, right? And it's accompanied by your Odu, right? And additionally, understanding who is your guardian Orisha. Eshu, or your fundamental Eshu, is given to you when you go through Hand of Ifá, Mano de Rula. Right? This is another reason why we understand that at a certain point in time, there were no babalaos, maybe to kind of truly uprise the faith as fast as the Olorishas were able to gather traction, because there was more of them and there was rare babalaos. We understand this. We spoke about this. And if you don't, hey, shoot questions in the chat room. Let's talk about these things. Right. So, when we understand that, now the Ochas and the Orishas needed guidance, needed to kind of highlight and pull some of that gatekeeper of Ache, right, type power. This is where we got, some of those things. So very important to understand and now correlate why it's important to understand that you got to receive, Hand of Ifa. You got to receive Awo Faka Iko Fa, right? You just have to, right? Because just because in the past they did it a certain type of way because there was no way of receiving, right, your Hand of Ifa, doesn't necessarily mean that today when you have a babalao that can do those ceremonies for you, that you don't do it. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And the exception in the past doesn't make the standard today, right? Because now we're past the exception and now we can start to understand things a little bit better. So you got to get your Eshu, and that's very fundamental based on my definition about Eshu so far. Babalaos love to work certain issues, certain ones a little bit more than others. You'll see where we work Ashikwelu. You'll see where we work Agriyelu, right? You'll see where we work Laroye. You'll see where we work Aye. You'll see where we work Odara, right? It doesn't mean that one is more powerful than the other. What matters is how they are consecrated and the Odun that they're tied to and the spiritual lineage that they came through. And those are the things that we got to begin to understand. Rick Savage, my man, and Buddha Boy. So let's summarize, right? Elegua is Lukumí adaptation in order to ensure that we had the power of Eshu, or an essence of Eshu, as we decided, or as we were migrated, right, through the diasporic ways, given form, given function, right, from, for home protection, for general spiritual work, in order to release Ashe, in order to give a way for us to open up those doors to the other Orishas. And Eshu is a divine principle, right, of casualty, of consequences, of truth, enforcement, and the broader Ifa cosmology. So I like to always explain to people that Eshu is life itself. Eshu is the yin on the yang. Olodumare Eshu. The black, the white, however way you want to look at it, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that one is bad or good. It just means that one's a creator and the other one's a gatekeeper. And that's something that you always got to remember. And then when we look at things at a universal scale, Olodumare, right, you also got to remember that Eshu, right, is that universal scale. Elegua is that terrestrial scale. And it's very important for us to understand and distinguish that. That's why Elegua lives in the land of Ocha. Very important. Rock consecrated in Ocha, Elegua. Head with eyes, nose, mouth, ear, right, mounted. Typically has a couple of things mounted on the top to include a plumaloro, or depending on what it needs to have on the top, because that's past specific. But you'll see that mounted, cement head, wooden statue. You'll see several different types. As Eshu, mounted in Ifa through Babalaos. And that's something that we always got to kind of remember as we go through this as well. All right. So this is going to be a powerful one. Okay, this is going to be a powerful one. So I need you all to kind of make sure that we're all kind of sinking in, right? And let's get after it. Let's get after it. All right. So let me see what I got here in the chat. What do I have in the chat? All right, Buddha Boy Bucheche, Taishad, I see you. Rick Savage, I see you. All right, looks like we're getting after it. Okay, so now I want to talk about something else. Let's go over a famous pataki, right, of Eshu. Right. Now that we kind of know about Eshu, I want to talk about Eshu. Bridget, Buddha Boy Bucheche, good to see you on here. Hey, so let me share this well-known pataki, and if you guys know it, I'm sorry. So two friends and the hat, right? Some of you guys already know where I'm going with this, right? So two friends claimed nothing could come between them, right? So Eshu, testing them, walked between their farms, wearing a hat that was colored red on one side and white on the other side, right? No, it was red on one side and black on the other side, right? One friend said, "Hey, did you see that red hat?" The other replied, "No, it was black." Their disagreement escalated right into a fight brought before the village chief, and Eshu revealed, "I wore both colors. You both saw the truth, but your pride blinded you." Right? Here is something that I really, and I always like to kind of bring together, because a lot of times people don't understand Eshu's ways. Eshu is not a liar, right? He's not necessarily even a trickster, to be honest with you. He just exposes our lies. He exposes our egos. He exposes our selfishness. He tests our humility and ability to see beyond our own perspective. This is why Eshu is evolution itself. And you gotta always remember that. Right. So now let's talk about a couple of other things that I think it's important for us to kind of understand and explore further. Hey, Buddha boy Abucheche, Tribe of Us, Buddha boy Abucheche, Bridget, good to see you guys on here. Good, 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 good. All right, so the tools. I want to talk about tools of Eshu, right? There's several Oduns in Ifa that will always dictate certain things, right? Many times you see the feather, right? A lot of people understand the feather because the feather is probably one of the most famous items that distinguishes Eshu, which is the plumaloro or odire, right? And so when you see the feather, and it's a reddish type feather, it comes from an African gray parrot, right? That has the tail feather that is red. And there's another pataki for this, and then I guess we'll touch on that pataki at some other time. Um, because we're not going to talk about that. I want to focus on Eshu, but I want to make sure you guys kind of understand who Eshu is. We already talked about the Eshu. It's mounted by babalaos. We understand that Eshu, at times you're going to see a nail, right? And at times you may even see three little needles, right? And one of my god kids asked me the other day. They said, "Hey, what's with the three needles, right?" And I had to remind them. Or better yet, I didn't even remind them, so I apologize. I basically told them, I said, "Hey, I'm going to mention it in this particular YouTube live." And when they came to me and they asked me, I said, "Well, you know, everything that we do in Ifa, even down to the ingredients that we use, for Eshu, right? And any Odisha, to be honest with you, that comes out of um anything that we got to do for consecrations or Odishas, we always go back to Ifa, right? So let me explain. The three needles in the nail, right, stands for the precision that's necessary and the divine reinforcement, right? You also a lot of times see the crown of Orumila, right? The white, the green, right? That's called the crown of Orumila, right? Which symbolizes the divine instruction. Eshu's role as the gatekeeper of Ache and the gatekeeper of destiny, no different than Orumila, is the Orisha of destiny to a certain point, divination, the reconstructor of destiny, right? And this is another reason why Eshu and Orumila are like BFFs. Another reason why Babalaos have to be very adverse in the concepts of how do we manage Eshu? How do we mount Eshu? How do we give Eshu? And how and why it's very fundamental for us to give it to you in the beginning. Right. So a lot of people have a very hard time understanding that. And a lot of people need to understand this because this is very critical in our faith. Because at the end of the day, nonetheless, when you go to Obeka, right, and the Odung of Obeka, it tells us to put a knife, right? Put a knife to Eshu, right? All right. Then you start to kind of go in different Oduns of things. And you begin to kind of see where there's other Oduns that start to kind of talk about the knife and talk about the need for Eshu to have that knife. We talk about the Garabato stick. We talk a lot about different things that just has to happen in order for Eshu to be reinforced, because just like anything else, we always got to reinforce things. Sometimes in our life, and I explained this to my god kids a few times now, that our spiritual energy is like a battery. And at times it depletes. At times you have to get that refresh. Every year you gotta, feed your consecrated items. Every year you gotta make sure that the battery stays high. At times we gotta reinforce, your Eshu or your Ogun or whatever it may be that Ifa is marking, because those things matter, right? And so then you start talking about that. Then, for a lot of people, they don't even realize that the Babalao is doing more than just putting things on top and making it look pretty. No, The babalaos are putting things inside, right? Inside, right? And that carga or that charge that's going inside, man, I'm telling you, it is something that's divine, right? It's something that is divine. It's something that is very powerful and needs to be honored. So let's talk about this a little bit. Let's talk about this a little bit. All right. So we notice that Eshu has many different shapes and sizes and paths. Particularly, we find that, there are five paths of Eshus that typically people, gravitate to, right? La Roya, you hear it in songs, you hear it in chants, right? And specifically, La Roya is very important path because it's a talkative, a very strategic issue. It's the one that presents, the abilities for prosperity in the marketplace, right? It's very good for folks who have positions that have to do with instructing or speaking or convincing politicians, lawyers. You see what I'm saying? Right? So you see Eshu Laroya, and then you see Eshu Ashikwelu. Eshu Ashikwelu is a very, very famous, issue that we mount, and particularly because, in Ifa, we have a very close connection with the Egun side, very close connection to Orun, right? And not Orun like the consecration Orun, but Orun, the ancestral plane. And when we look at Ashikwelu, we look at the concept that lives, underground, right? The concept that lives, beneath the earth and understands what the Eguns need and marches the Eguns back and forth. And particularly, we see this in Iwori Meji. And a lot of people, in case you're not wondering, Iwori Meji is a very mystical sign. Iwori Meji is one of those Oduns. And even the Iwori series, and I know I got to get to Iwori eventually. I think the next one I got to do is Odi Meji, and we're going to get the Odi series. But more importantly, when we look at Ashikwelu and we look at Iwori Meji, we look at how much power and how much destiny and how much responsibility sits with Ashikwelu. So another good one to have for all of those that are out there. Let me give you some advice. Ashikwelu, is one of those, and even Agrielu, even Agrielu and Ashikwelu, I like for anybody who deals a lot with, for my paleros out there, my gangoleros, right? For my folks that receive Orum, right? You need to probably maybe start looking into Ashikwelu and Agrielu, right? And the reason why Agrielu, I haven't explained Agrielu, so my mistake on that. Agrielu is the head that owns the world, right? He is basically very much connected to the Eguns, just like Ashikwelu. But Ashikwelu, again, Ashikwelu has a role to play with the Eguns, but doesn't necessarily have a direct connect with the Eguns, but lives and has the pathway to those Eguns. That's why Ashikwelu complemented with Agrielu is very important. Very important. And we always gotta understand that going forward. Something else that, as we begin to kind of push forward. Reggae, boy, Bucheche, good to see you on there. And then as we start to look at, we got um, Eshu. So when we talk about Eshu is typically an Eshu that is reserved for the water divinities. Ochun, Yemaya, Olokun. This is the reason why in a lot of lineages, right? I'm not gonna say all lineages, but I want to make sure that you guys are truly understanding the lineages per se, because like my lineage, for example, we actually give Eshu Aye with our Olokum. In other lineages, it doesn't necessarily work that way. Because the Olokum of Ifa is a very complex, Orisha, right? That has a lot of different secrets. Right? That's the reason why we call it Olokun, Olokun Belegun, but let me not get into that topic. We'll talk about Olokun some other time. Or Bani Legun. Okay. So So let's continue to kind of walk through this. So as we begin to look at Aye, we look at babalaos give Aye in order to build money, prosperity, allow people to kind of fundamentally work their path. A lot of times they open it up because they have faith that the person that's coming to them has a destiny to fulfill. They have consecrations that need to be done. So a lot of times, they receive a Eshu Aye. Nothing wrong with it if that's your fundamental issue that you receive when you get your mano de orula. Nothing wrong about it. You can get any of those issues because believe it or not, you will even see that issue. We ask right before we do hand of Ifa to anybody, right? The babalao is asking and trying to connect with you and making sure that this issue and the path that we're mounting is the path that's going to walk with you. This is not a generic thing. This is a let's ask and see what's going on, right? And that's something that's important. Hey, bro boy, Abucheche, what's going on, Sam? What can you say about Eshu Alakintu? If you have any info to share. No, absolutely, Sam. I'll get there. Let me get past these paths first. Boy, Barino, when you speak of to mount, can you explain what that means? Absolutely. To mount means the Babalaos are not going to the botanica and going off of the shelf, getting the issue, and then putting things on top to make it look nice. To mount something means that we have to put secrets and ingredients and eggums and all types of things that you couldn't even imagine, right? Inside of something, seal it up in order for those secrets to stay one, secrets, but two, to begin to metamorphosize, right? That concoction to create this spiritual explosion that now mysticizes your issue. That's a mount or any other thing that we mount. Hopefully that makes sense. What does it mean when a babalao says Eshu came down with you? Sam, great question. So Sam, um, something that I would like to kind of, and I'm trying not to defer because I not get off the topic of Eshu, but issues with everybody, right? Um, Eshu sits with everybody here in the back of the neck. A lot of babalaos and the elders and how I was taught was Eshu, Eshu Ipaku. Because when you were born, we understand that you can't shake Eshu. We just talked about it. Eshu has a divine scale that we need to always recognize. And because of the divine scale, and because we know we came down with Eshu, that's the reason why the Babalaos always say you always have to cross Eshu. You always got to validate with Eshu. You always got to receive Eshu first. Another reason why he's fundamental. But more importantly, Eshu is always with us. Even then, when we talk about um, I'm trying to answer something else here in the chat. Somebody sent me a message, but even then, when you talk about issue, every time you get and every Odum has an issue that's married to it. Because every Odun or every destiny sign, when you receive your Iko Fa and Awo Faka, you begin to see that every sign has an issue that's married. Why? Because every one of those signs that represents you has an issue that's going to help guide you better than the next avatar, or in this case, the concoction, the mount, right, that goes inside of issue, matches the person in order to enhance their abilities both spiritually and physically, right? So when we talk about that, you know, when we talk about that, we have to be very cautious, you know what I mean, on what that mount is. We have to understand that issue is always with us. And we always got to remember that. And something that I share a lot is, hey, you're not tricking the world. You may trick the world if you're a bad person. You may be deceitful. You may be a liar. You may be a lot of different things, right? And you may fool everybody. But the spiritual world, you'll never fool. And Eshu will see it all. The Egun will see it all. So, warning for the masses. All right. Now, Alakintu. So, Sam, I think I finished talking about Aye, right? We talked about Aye. We talked about Agrielu, right? We talked about um, Ashikwelu, right? I think we're good now, right? I think we talked about pretty much all of them. Okay, what we got here? John Rockwell. I truly believe at the end of the movie, Interstellar shows where Eshu resides, lives, controls, and operates out of when they went through the Blackmore and found a dimension that controls time. Interstellar. Hey, you know what? So, Johnny, I haven't seen the movie Interstellar. Shame on me. But I'm gonna have to take a look at it to make sure I truly understand it, okay? All right. So now, so now, talked about Laroye, Ashikwelu, Agrielu, and I wanted to talk about. Okay, let's just talk about Alakentu. I had some in my head, but we'll just talk about it. Oh, black hole. Got you. No, no, hell yeah. Johnny, I had to take a look at it. I'm gonna take your recommendation. So Alakentu. Issue Alakentu is a very powerful, right? Issue, but one that's not necessarily one of the primary ones. Right, so when we talk about Eshu Alakentu, it's closely tied with Owani Alakentu, right? The Odu, right? Where it gets his name and where Eshu gets his path is from that particular Odu. If you guys haven't noticed or put it together, well, now you did. Okay, so now when we look at it, we talk a lot about where, the spiritual threshold, right, during crisis in our lives sometimes begins to thin, right? Which is the reason why your adrenaline rushes. You sometimes have that Superman effect. You got that fly, fight, or freeze concepts, right? So this awani alakintu or this eshu alakintu, right, suggests control and dominion over a place of contention, a place of fire, a place of unpredictability. This is a very good issue for folks that are dealing with a lot of problems, folks that need that extra oomph in their life because their life is full of turmoil, right? They can never catch a break, right? So Onwayanlekentu is one of those fierce protectors, spiritual warriors, right? Alekentu is especially important when you talk about justice, people who are constantly dealing with law situations. Um, it's a very vicious transformation in people's lives. This is what Eshu Alakentu was built for: spiritual warfare. For people who feel like, hey, I'm dealing with a lot and I need help because I'm dealing with a lot. Because I got crazy baby mamas, I got crazy baby daddies, I got all these people throwing brujeria at me, whatever it may be. And whatever it may be, Eshu Alakentu is there because it makes sure that justice and that spiritual warfare is balanced in your life. He's often called, in a lot of moments, right, when the roads are blocked due to, as say, external circumstances, right, internal spiritual resistance, unresolved karmic debt, right, as Eshu Alakintu. And I think that's very important for us to remember. Certain issues that are most commonly found together. There are certain issues that are most commonly found together. You're gonna have to help me on this one a little bit there, Tori, so I can better understand your question, right? And then Greg, you got Irosun Sa. Greg, Greg always trying to juice me for something. I got you. All right, good. We're gonna put those in the parking lot. We're gonna put those in the parking lot. And I always like to um, put all my questions in one thing because then I got too many questions and then I get back and I lose my train of thought and you already know it goes south quick. All right, so I'm gonna answer Tori. I already talked about like in do, talked about mounting. Irosun Sa, right? And then, okay, all right. All right, so where were we? Where were we? So then when we talk about who is Eshu Odara, I think this is probably one of the most important things that you need to kind of take away from here. Eshu Odara, what is Odara? And why Eshu Odara? Eshu Odara typically 9 out of 10 times is going to be that issue that's going to be given to you when you receive your hand of Ifa. So another path of Eshu, particularly, is Eshu Odara. But what does Odara mean? Eshu Odara just means beautiful, it means perfect, it means good. Odara. Eshu Odara, particularly, this particular path is very important because it's the cosmic balancer of things. It's aligned 100% with Orumila, which is 9 out of 10 times why you receive that. You know, this Eshu ensures that the message of Ifa is not only delivered, but fulfilled. Right? So Eshu Odara is very fundamental, right? So if you have another issue, no, little boy, it's not that it's wrong. But Eshu Odara is going to be one that really talks and resonates with you, that has multiple ingredients of multiple things, right? That calls out to you and your spiritual, connection with Eshu, right? Eshu Odara clears paths, right? With precision and guards, all that spiritual timing, right? And again, he's not chaos, he's divine execution. And that means all those things that we plan, all those embosses that we do, all those obras that we do, boom, that's what you get. Right. So, with that, I'm gonna get to the questions and then we are going to call it a night. What do you guys think? And then we just go from there. All right. So I'm gonna start with Greg. Greg, so in Irosun Sa, there's a lot of controversy, right, on what issue goes with Irosunsa. And I'm the first one to tell you, I'm humble. I'm gonna have to grab my book now. I'm gonna have to grab my book. This is the book that my godfather made for me long time ago. And in here, I got all the secrets that you need. You guys can't see what's in the book, only me. So Irosunsa. You always gotta be prepared when you do these lives, right? Irosunsa. Irosunsa. All right, guys. I know I'm keeping you waiting. I know I'm keeping you waiting. But I told you guys to ask me questions. And so in Hiroshima, there's gonna be two major issues that are gonna be for you, right? Issue Alayeki, Alayiki, that also lives in Hiroshima, right? Because you asked me about Hiroshima. Yeah. And then you have another one called Issue Kaika, Kaika, that also lives in Hiroshima. And then you got Eshu Unyulu, Unyolo, that comes out of Irosundi, right? And these are gonna be the primary issues that live in the Irosum series of things. And then it's gonna be up to you to ask Ifa, right? As a babalao, hey, let me ask Ifa, and figure out which one is the one that needs to walk with your Odum, right? And then verify that everything else is good. But you know this, I know you know this. You're a smart babalao, and you're on it. But I hope that helps. All right, all right. What else we got here? What else we got here? All right, bam, bam, bam. Which issue at Osun Sa? Sam said, okay, when we receive issue as practitioners, not yet crowned, what can we not do? What a great question, Sam. What a great question. Hey, so here's your issue. Here's some things that you got to understand. And these are things that you can always ask your ile, right? Again, I am merely one person, one babalao perspective that's out there. Always follow the guidance from your godfather, from your ile. But Issues, probably one of the most important things that I want you to remember about issue is that issues everywhere. Issue sees everything. Issue's job, no different than when I was explaining Eshu Odara, is and all the issues to a certain point, they're everybody is in lockstep with Orumila. Right? So the first rule is follow your ita in ikofa, awofaka, making sure that you have that 100% right. When you want to go to issue for something, I tell people all the time, don't just go to your divinities for the sake of going to them because you want something, right? Because you and the other 100,000 million people, right, all want something. So what makes you that much special? So then we got to kind of fast forward a little bit, right? Then we got to go even further. Now I need to go to issue because I am looking for that cosmic justice. I'm looking for how do I kind of even the playing field? How do I get to where I need to get to? Right? So then you got to go even further than that. If you're going to sit down with issue and you're going to ask for something from issue, then you should be doing that behind a consultation so that you know that what's lockstep destiny to reconstruct their destiny, get some wisdom, right? And that's what Ifa is going to give you in order to figure out the solutions that you need, right? Now, to answer your question now, because I needed to go through that in order for you to understand this issue, you're going to take some palm oil and you're going to rub your issue down. You're going to light a candle to him. You're going to blow rum to him. If you got a cigar, you're going to take a cigar and you're going to siphon, right? So that means you got a cigar lit. You flip it over. Don't burn your tongue, right? And you're going to put it in your mouth and you're going to blow and siphon that tobacco smoke, right? Eshu loves this stuff, right? He loves this stuff. That's something that we always got to remember that Eshu has little obras. And for those of you that are aligned with Olorishas, the things you do with Elegua, you can do with Eshu. No problem. But a lot of things that we do, particularly with Ocha or with Eshu, you can't necessarily do with Ifa, right? So then you got to kind of make sure that that is, or some, sorry, the things you do with Eshu, you can't necessarily do with Elegua. I think I said that right. So I want to make sure that we're clear on that, right? Because there's things like, and a lot of people don't understand this, the things that we do with Eshu, at times as we feed them things, right, that you can't do with Elegua. So you got to be careful and you got to make sure you understand what your spiritual elders have taught you and make sure you go through that. So one of the greatest things that I always like to tell people to do, and I even ask, in IFA consultations, I say, hey, if Eshu wants something or Elegua wants something, right? And my go-to to ask is always Adimu, right? And Adimus are always great things that are organic, the fruits, right? And understanding that Eshu takes three, you give Eshu three, right? So maybe three apples, three guavas, three whatever you pick, right? And those are things that you're giving from Akokan, things from the heart. Those are the adimus that you do. If you want to obra because you're really trying to kind of butter something up, and maybe you want to ask for something, okay? Again, very dangerous to just do things because you want to ask because hey, you have them and let's get after it. I always tell people, I say, you can go that route, but you're only completing 33% of the equation because the other 33% that you're going to need is a consultation. And the other 33% that you're going to need is going to be the who's going to actually perform the technique and what is that technique, right? So that's the reason why it's not just about you and what you do, but what is exactly needed, right? And how do you perform and what is to perform. And maybe it's not you that needs to perform it, and maybe it's a priest that needs to do it. So very important as you play that out there. But one of the other things that people do is that you take three guavas, right, and you kind of like a jack-o'-lantern, right? The three guavas, you're gonna cut, right, around it, take the lid off, right, and then you're gonna kind of gut and scoop the guava meat and put it in a bowl, right, from three different guavas. And you're gonna mix it up with the basic ingredients, right? And I'll let your Ile teach you what that is, because I don't want to just give you the recipe. I want you to learn it, but I want you to ask questions, and I want you to get after your Ile. And if you really don't have an Ile and you have an issue and you're trying to figure things out, email me. You guys know how to get a hold of me. Descriptions, right? Look for it, and I'll help you out. Anyway, you take the meat, you go ahead and mix it with the basic ingredients. You're gonna put inside those three now hollow shells. You're gonna go ahead and put certain things in there, and you're gonna take that meat, put it inside, and then you're gonna put the lid back on, and you're gonna give that to Eshu. Right? There's little things like that that you can do. Right? There's tons of things. Take a coconut, offer him a coconut. You don't gotta crack the coconut, but clean yourself. Remember, anytime that you present to your forehead and you say Agori, Agori Paku, Ago Fun, and you start to go through that, you're attaching your essence to your issue, right? Or any Orisha for that matter, and you're allowing that flow of communication to be even stronger. So hopefully that makes sense for you. What else we got here? Greetings, my brother from Atlas. Hey, Johnny. Hey, Buruboya. Buruboya. Hey, you know me, brother. I'm square and I'm always in the light. Unfortunately, being in the military, I'm riding in the dark. You know, dudes, right? So yeah, so I mean, but no. Hey, that's awesome, brother. That's awesome. I love to see that. I love to see my Freemason brothers out here. All right, let's see. Me and two of my children. Okay, Tori, you and two of your children have La Roya. Two of them have Beleque. Okay. One was told they typically live together. Do you know how true that is? Oh, no, absolutely, Tori. So a lot of the babalao, we always got to train on kind of better understanding different paths of issue. Now, I don't know, and I don't want to go over your elders. I don't know what they told you. Um, but you're saying you have La Roya, which I talked about already, right? And two of them have Beleki. Hmm. Hmm. Well, Tori, I guess I'm just trying to dissect your question. So I don't want you to think that, at the end of the day, um, I'm not understanding you. But Tori, so all the issues, and I wish I can take my camera outside and I would show you down the door of my house. I got all my issues. I got a giant big old clay plate, right? And I have the issue of my Odun. I have the issue that I received when I did Hand of E5. I got another issue that lives with my Ode. And I got another issue that lives at the door of the house. Right? So I got multiple issues that sit there, and then I have my Elegua for Mocha, right? And they're all there. They're all there. And that's okay. That is perfectly okay. Right. So if that's the question, hopefully I answered them. Right. And two of them, so two of my children have La Roya. Me and two of my children have La Roya, and two of them have Beleki. So put them all together. Put them all together. Put them at the door. Issue is issue. It doesn't change the equation. What energy and what's power is up that issue and how it connects with the person that is consecrated to that issue. Different story, but issue is issue nonetheless. But something about issue Beleke. Yeah, this is an issue that's known particularly for several things, right? And And a lot of times we see where this issue is consecrated in order to it's in order to man for children that's tough. But if that's what he found mark, that's what P found mark. But anyway, it's for like people that the wolves in sheep's clothing, right? So that they're not being kind of tricked or hoodwinked or Johnny hoodwink. And you know what I mean? They're not being tricked and things like that. To avoid the hypocrisy in life, right? The name itself is associated to the spiritual connection and the situation involving betrayal, right, or hidden enemies, right? Beleke is also linked to the Odun of Oyekun Otura, right? And it's said, right, that this particular issue guards kind of the astral planes, right? The threshold where falsehood and truth kind of collide. It's kind of like that gray space, right? And so then Beleke is always good when people feel like they need the truth or they feel like there's a lot of betrayal around them, right? It forces the truth to the surface a lot of times, right? A lot of different work with that particular issue. So we always got to kind of remember what that is. Hopefully that helps you. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. It's always important, guys, when you receive an issue, you should have like an instruction manual. You should have some form of understanding what issue you received and the why behind it, right? Always important. And a lot of times I would tell you if it comes from you receiving a wafaka equal fa, a lot of times about allows, we really don't know what we don't know. We just know that, in my case, and again, I'm just one person. Everybody has a different method on how to do it, right? I'm asking for your mom's name, your dad's name, your birthday, right? I may or may not tell you to go, get a rock at, somewhere and I don't want to tell you guys where or get into that, but, and I may tell you to bring it to me. It all depends on what Ifa guides me to do because I am merely a man. And guess what? And humans make mistakes. So I do everything behind Ifa and let Oromila drive the car. Right? So very important. Let's see what else we got here. What is the relationship between Eshu and Ori? Oh, Eshu and Ori. That's I just told you guys. So when we think about Ori, right, we gotta remember that Ori nonetheless is your destiny. Right? Ori is what's guiding you and pushing you forward in order for you to accomplish um that purpose, right? But more importantly, without issue or without complementing issue, right, you find yourself in a predicament, right? Where issue being the gatekeeper of Ache, right, and also being a gatekeeper of all the orishas, to include the osolbos in the world, the misfortunes in the world. Um, you know, we gotta be careful. And this is the reason why Eshu has to be complemented in anything. So it's not about what's the relationship between Eshu and Ori, but it's the relationship between Eshu and everything that's divine. We got to make sure that we stay on top of Eshu. Another reason why, if you're not feeding your Eshu every year, you got to get after it. Right? If you've had your Orishas, maybe, let's say 5 years. Let's throw a number out there. Right? Maybe it's time to ask your godfather, hey, Padrino, let's give it a go. Let's do what it do. And allow Eshu to kind of really get fed because Eshu's been taking care of you. Eshu's been taking care of your family, your home, right? But just food for thought. Okay. Um, Eshu Laroye resonates with me because of the crossroads being 490 degree. Johnny kills me. Johnny's a square and compass for real. All right. Buddha boy, Johnny, Buddha boy. Oh man. All right. Does Eshu have any relation to us in the afterlife? Okay. Yes. So Sam, Eshu is everywhere. This is the reason why I wanted to talk to you about the Eshus that are from the afterlife, or not from the afterlife, but connect the afterlife to here. Right? When we talk about Shikwelu, Agrielu, right, we begin to kind of realize quickly, like, oh wow, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why does Eshu have pathways over here and Orisha's got pathways over here? There is an issue for every Orisha. There is an issue for every Odu. Right? Think about it for a minute. Really put some thought behind that. Right? Issue is everything, and issue is everywhere. Your journey didn't end because remember, like I stated earlier, issue and your exposure to issue will be even on the afterlife because issue is that complement, right, to the grand creator, the grand architect of the universe. So, so with that said, we got to look at it in that perspective. Eshu will always be with us, 100%. Is Eshu always placed in the front entrance of the house? What if there are more than one entrance to the house? So, Paul, yeah, it's always going to be placed in the front entrance of the house. I always tell people, look, go for the entrance that's most used. Because remember that one of the purposes that Eshu has, right, or Elegua mainly, is to protect the energy of the house. So that flow that comes in and out. There's things that you even have to do, not just beyond placing your warriors at the front of the door of the house, but there's are things that you got to reinforce the doors with, right? Whether it's the chain or the arrow of Ochosi, there's a lot of different things that have to happen to the door of a house in order, or for of a spiritual person's home, that is always going to be very critical as you go forward, right? That's important as well. So yes, Paul, you want to put it where you think it's going to be best suited, right, to protect the home, right? For me, for example, my wife's issue is at one door. My issues are at another door. I just happen to have a lot of issues in the house, right? So very important going forward. So it's kind of think about and strategically place things and based on the needs of your life, right? I don't want you guys to all run off and have 500 issues, but I'm just trying to, share a different perspective. And then it says, JD, Buddha boy, hey, what are some tools one can use to protect ourselves and relieve any negativity harboring on or around us? Hey, JD, what a wonderful question. And I will leave you with this. And when it comes to protecting yourself spiritually, there's a couple of things that are just great to use. One is, herb baths, right? That's always going to be a gimme. You can get that from any spiritual priest or priestess, that knows how to work osain or miedo. Using even spiritual baths is a good supplement. And I can't really call it a supplement because those ewe mesis, those things are phenomenal. You sometimes hear us call it omiedo, right? Um, but you can also do an efun mesi, which is now you taking cascarilla, shea butter, take some rum, right? And take some white flowers. Try to find one of those spiritual baths, like Florida water or 1800, spiritual colognes, right? And you mix all that stuff up really good, right? And you clean the house with that, right? You can clean yourself with it, right? Just remembering to omit the oti if you're a child of Obatala, and you can even shower with it, and that's a really good thing that can help you out. There's also all types of things and tools that we can consecrate, no different than what I just mentioned earlier with the chain of Ogun, the arrow of Ochosi. Those are things to reinforce your doorways, right? And if you have, your warriors, and you feel you need more protection, you talk to your godparents and you say, hey, I need to reinforce my Ogun, right? There's different levels to Ogun, right? To reinforce Ogun. So that's always something good to do. There's an angel sign that you can get for protection, right? That the babalaos mount. I think I have one here. Let's see. Oh yeah, look, I have one right here. This is like an angel sign, right? For that I mount for the sons of Chango, right? Or if somebody needs Chango's power, right? This is really good for Chango, for protection, right? There's other angel signs that I'll show you another one. There's yin-chill signs that come like this, right? That we mount, right? And sometimes it has a cup, sometimes it has a horn, and we mount that. We consecrate it. We do all types of our brujeria. We do our stuff, our crazy stuff. But just so you kind of have an understanding, sometimes the yin-chill sign is pocket held, right? Where I kind of place it in a pouch or I keep it in my pocket. This one's mine. This is mine. That's for this. But there's a lot of different things that you can use for sure. I recently watched another babalao YouTube channel this past Sunday, and he has someone on that got crowned a locum direct. And I had told my godmother about it, and she is very old school. All right, Johnny, let me tell you, the old school folks, and again, every lineage is different, right? And I can just tell you my perspective. The crowning of a locum direct works in Nigeria. The crowning of a locum direct for Lukumi. Um, and again, I'm in the land of Ifa, I'm not in the land of Ocha, right? So even then, I'm gonna choose my words wisely. I don't understand it. You know what I mean? How do you crown a local direct? I have done research on it because you also hear people doing certain things and crowning certain things direct and this, that, and the other. But Johnny, something that we gotta be careful about is that's a dangerous precedence, right? And the day you get crowned, Johnny, and your godmother will probably tell you the same thing, you will understand why we think it's a little bit too premature, or maybe it's just lack of understanding, and I'm okay with that, right? I don't know all the answers, and if somebody has the answers, please send it to me, and I will gladly recognize a direct crowning to a local. But because I don't, I cannot, particularly in my humble opinion, say right or wrong, but I can say that I have a hard time understanding how to crown a locum direct. But then again, I'm not in Ocha. I'm a babalao. I'm in Ifa. I'm not in the land of Ocha. And that's going to be a very big thing that tells me that not my cup of tea and not my tea to drink, right? So hopefully that makes sense. And she's an elder woman. She didn't want to believe me. What are your thoughts on how can I explain to her this? Johnny, there's nothing to explain to her. Your godmother is the law of the house. That's just the way it is. You know what I mean? That's just the way it is. And again, certain lineages don't recognize it. You know what I mean? I'll be the first one to tell you. The lineage that I come from, me, right? So where my Olorishas were born, they don't recognize the direct crowning of Olokun. Do I know people are in Cuba doing that? Yes. Have I heard grumblings about people doing it in the US? Yes. Again, my lineage doesn't do it, so I don't do it. Do I respect other people that do it? Absolutely. Why would I not respect them? Because again, I'm not the keeper of all the secrets. I don't know everything. And so we want to make sure that you stick to your lineage because that is where your Ache originated from. That's where you were born from. And that's what you want to respect. Again, it's not to bash one or the other or anything like that. Hopefully that makes sense, Johnny. All right. All right. Guys, we are at 1 hour and 7 minutes. Iburu boya ibucheche. It was a pleasure. Like, share, subscribe. If you have not joined the channel, join the channel to get exclusive content, right? Boom, just for the members, just for the members. Right. So, with that said, always looking for feedback, always looking for suggestions. Shoot me emails on maybe topics that you guys would love to talk on, and I will get after it, right? I will gladly sit here for an hour and talk to you all. All right, with that said, Iburu, Iboya, Bucheche, Cyberland. You feel babalao? At least I hope so. More doing, they like get checking out. And now it's time to go to bed because I gotta work in the morning. Iburu boy. Let's see, Sam. Oh, Sam, you snuck one in on me. If you receive mano de orula and get crowned, am I Ocha or Ifa? Nah, you're everything. Everybody got to cross a land of Ifa in order to get to Ocha. Remember that. To dictate who your guardian Orisha is, you go through Ifa. And for those of you who already went through Ocha and now are kind of having to come back to Ifa because maybe they didn't pull your guardian, I understand that certain lineages, and I'm never gonna negate the power of Elegua because the power of Elegua comes from Eshu. So it's a good topic, right? And a good segue and for me to kind of continue this conversation on Eshu. We're not gonna necessarily negate, but we go back to just because you can doesn't mean you should. We understand that the literature and doctrine, right, and the Yoruba cosmology of things is you receive your hand of Ifa first, dictate who your guardian Orisha is, your Odun. Does that dictate that you need to go get crowned? Maybe you need to go to Ifa, whatever that needs to look like. It's all based on that concoction of guardian Orisha, Odu, not just one, but multiple, because you got your Okuta and you got your Tomala, right? And your prophecy, and now that gets put into the calculator, right? And that babalao owes you an answer on what you need to do next. And then you go to Ocha. So you always be taken care of. You always have a babalao in your back pocket. You're always going to have an olorisha in your back pocket, right? And then for those of you who get scratched and have to do things with palo, you're always going to have a tata or a yaya in your back pocket, right? You're going to be working multiple lands. The only people that are not going to walk multiple lands anymore becomes the babalaos. Because the babalaos have to have a universal concept and a universal unbiased attitude towards everything. They have to learn the secrets of it all, of everything. They just have to learn it, right? And then more importantly, they have to represent everyone. So they can't have loyalty in multiple places, but they're here to represent everyone. They're here to learn everything, and they're here to kind of make sure that we are guiding communities. All right. Buddha boy Abucheche. A lot of love for you, Sam. Rick Savage, Ibudo Boya, Paul Marino, Ibudo Boya. You guys have a great night. Now I'm really checking out for real. I'm really grateful that Babala like you that can explain the religion to me. Thank you very much. Johnny, always, brother. I'm here for you, man. Here for you. Shoot me an email if you need anything.